In today's story, we follow a treasure hunter who is searching for his missing brother. And on his journey, he encounters a tower of mystery and wonder. But before we jump in, do you crave something new and original? Well, here at Krane Originals, that's exactly what we are trying to accomplish. But we can't do it without you, adventurer. We need your help to craft the world of Sha'Rune. A world where wizards fade and demons rule. Where one man can change his destiny. Where one like and subscribe can make all the difference. But enough with the begging. And without any further ado, sit back, relax, and together, let's explore another tale from the world of Sha'Rune. In the year 522 of the Second Era, Ackland was a nation known for many things. From forests of twisted trees with black leaves, to meadows that swallowed travelers whole, and mountains that scraped the very clouds, where storms rolled but never rained. It was a land of mystery, where people lived, but none truly ruled. For to rule Ackland was to war with nature herself. And perhaps nothing captured this madness and wonder of this land more than the moving tower. A simple tower of jagged stone and creaking iron that wandered without a pattern, windowless, and with a large single gate that seemed impossibly large. It left no trail, made no sound when it moved, and obeyed no map or reason. Only one truth followed it. Wherever that tower went, someone always vanished. This is the story of one such disappearance and the man who dared to follow it. Victor Rousseau was a man who feared nothing, but was overly cautious about almost everything. You see, Victor was more or less an ordinary man, but it was his job that made him unique. Victor was a true treasure seeker, one of the last of his kind, and he would tell anyone who was willing to listen. He was not born in Ackland. No, he was Britannian by blood. However, he didn't consider himself a Britannian or an Ackland. He called himself a son of the world. He had traveled far and wide seeking to uncover the mysteries and truths behind hidden stories. Now you see, Victor used to seek treasure and unfold the world's mysteries with his brother David. But years ago, the two heard of a tower filled with untold riches that no one could see, and anyone who dared to enter would never be seen again. It was exactly the kind of thing the brothers hunted for, and they would find it, or it would find them. Victor still wasn't sure. All he knew was that it took his brother, and he would not rest till he found them both again. Victor spent years wandering in search of the tower that seemed to elude him. He followed whispers of the tower that flickered like dying embers on a withered map, and any half-remembered tales shared by travelers at lonely inns. Although each person described the tower differently, they all conveyed a shared sight, a shape on the horizon that vanished if stared at for too long, accompanied by a door that loomed both inviting and forbidding. Yet, despite the chasing of every drunken, cautious traveler story, Victor always arrived just a day or two late. It was almost as if the tower knew he was looking for it. But all would change on one harsh winter's night. Victor's bones were shivering, and his ears felt as if they might break off from the cold. Terrified that he would not survive the night, he walked down what seemed to be a fading road. Eventually, he arrived at a village that was not marked on any of his maps. There was no true road, only the narrow path he had taken, as if the wind itself was pushing him forward. Eventually, Victor would follow the fated path down to a village that felt strangely off, as if it were a place long forgotten. Still, Shivering from the winter storm, Victor trudged through the snow and howling winds. As he got closer to the village, an eerie sensation began to settle in. He noticed that all the houses he passed seemed to have their lights on and doors open, almost inviting him to enter. Yet, each time he stepped inside, the homes were empty. Despite feeling lived in, they were devoid of their people. Yet dolls and meals just eaten could be found all over. One by one, Victor entered each house, briefly warming himself before moving on. But every place was the same. Empty. Eventually, he found himself at a statue positioned in what felt like the dead center of the village square. Its eyes were so detailed and wide open that they sent chills down Victor's spine. He stared at it, or perhaps it stared at him. He could not tell. All he knew was that he wanted to get away, far away from this place. Victor had faced his fair share of odd situations over the years, but this was different. It felt dangerous. The hair on the back of his neck stood up, and a profound sense of urgency urged him to run. After all, you don't live as long as Victor had in his line of work without learning to trust your instincts. So without wasting any time, he pulled on his fur coat and turned to leave, determined that whatever had happened in this town would not happen to him. But just as he was about to march back the way he came, he heard a whistling sound, almost like a screech. It felt as though it were calling his name, both whispering and screaming at the same time. He tried to ignore it, but the more he did, the louder it became. Finally, he felt he had no choice but to turn around and see what was calling him. And there it was, alone and almost taunting, looking down a hill at him. The tower. It was taller than he remembered, yet somehow still the same. It stood perfectly straight, almost as if the world were bending to it. As Victor got closer, he noticed there were no marks beneath it, no tracks, and no evidence that it hadn't always been there since the beginning. Victor was shaking. He felt a warm sensation building inside him, a mix of fear and anger. Though, before he knew it, he found himself standing before it in the snowy storm, its gate as intimidating as he remembered. Last time, he had been too scared and cowardly to go through, while his brother David entered almost as if in a trance. But before Victor could follow, they were gone. "Open!" Victor shouted, his voice booming through the cold air. "Give me back my brother!" he demanded, pointing threateningly at the tower. The tower responded, slowly opening her doors, inviting the man inside. Everything in that moment told Victor that he should run. Everything except his desire to find his brother. And that was enough for the man to push through, to enter the tower alone, like his brother had done so many years ago. As soon as he entered, the doors behind him began to close slowly, almost as if offering him one last chance to change his mind. But Victor was determined to stay. He would not leave without David. He stood still, watching as the door shut, trapping him inside. Immediately, Victor felt the warm air surrounding him. It was not comfortable or inviting. Instead, it resembled the heat of a fever, unsettling and oppressive. The walls were made of stone, but felt alive at the same time. And although there were no windows, light permeated the space. It all felt surreal, like a dream. With each step he took, the light seemed to shift, never brightening or dimming, but altering in response to his movement, almost as if it were guiding him to his destination. However, instead of leading him forward, it directed him downward. Now, despite the tower's position on a hill, Victor now found himself looking down at a spiraling stairwell that appeared to be impossibly long. As he descended, he saw rooms filled with wonders he could hardly believe. All of them beckoned to him, urging him to enter their chambers. One room was filled with gold. Another, women dancing with their arms and hands and hips and legs, inviting him in. Some rooms were filled with books and maps, while others held sand and water, storms swirling in both. It was impossible, yet he saw it all with his own eyes. Victor touched none of it. He had long learned the price of curiosity in places like this. The deeper he went, the louder the silence became, until it pressed against his ears with the weight of centuries. And then, without fanfare or threshold, he arrived. The final chamber was circular and vast. The walls lost to shadows. In the center stood a pedestal of stone, and upon it rested something so plain it startled him. A mirror. Oval and unadorned, it reflected nothing. Not the pedestal, not the light, not even Victor himself. He approached it as if he was pulled, and when he stood before it, he saw not his face, not his body, but his brother, David, older than Victor remembered, standing on the other side. He was screaming, but without sound, and behind him stood 100 others, men and women, old and young, all screaming, all silent. Their eyes shimmered like glass in a firelight. They did not blink. They just continued to scream silently. Victor reached out. The surface rippled like a rock thrown across the lake. When his fingers touched it, the tower shifted. The floor fell from beneath him, yet he did not fall. The walls folded and reformed, twisting around him like a serpent shedding its skin. He stood in a chamber of brass and bone, of gears that turned without sound, and levers that moved without touch. The mirror was gone. The pedestal remained, but on it sat a book bound in cracked leather. The cover with 2 words carved into them. Victor Russo, his name. He opened it without thinking. The pages were blank at first. Then slowly they began to fill, not with words, but with scenes. A village covered in snow. A man walking from house to house. A tower appearing from fog. A descent, a mirror, a man reaching, a moment repeating. He was reading the story of his arrival, not as if it had happened, but as if it was happening still. And with each turn of the page, the writing moved forward, one step ahead of him, knowing his thoughts before he formed them. And at the end, there was one final line. The tower does not take. It remembers. The book closed itself, and Victor turned and found that the mirror returned. This time it showed him not David, but himself. Yet not quite. The man in the mirror stood shorter, wore different clothes, younger, perhaps, but somehow wiser. His eyes burned with a strange understanding. and behind him stood people, not the same as before. They were unfamiliar, watching him with solemn faces, unblinking. He stepped forward. The mirror stepped forward too. Victor raised his hand, and so did the reflection. And then without warning, the mirror shattered, not outward, but inward, into 1,000 shards that fell like feathers and vanished before they reached the ground. And where the mirror had been, there was now a door. Terrified, but needing to understand this all, he passed through it. And immediately, the world went dark. Not knowing how much time had passed, Victor woke up, standing once more before the statue in the village square. Its eyes were shut. Scratching his head, he wondered how he had ended up there, and why he was there in the first place. As he looked around on that clear, sunny day, he saw a village he did not recognize. It was filled with people going about their day, some casting concerning glances at the strange man, having no idea where he was or why he was there. He ran to the nearest person he could find, startling them. He bombarded them with questions about his location and the current date. The wary villager responded, explaining that he had no idea how Victor had arrived. He mentioned that when everyone woke up, Victor was simply there, lying in front of the statue, and everyone assumed he was a drunk from a neighboring village. Victor stood still, trying to remember anything about himself. At first, he was confused about who he even was, but slowly, very slowly, his memories began to return. First came his name, then who he was. A treasure seeker. Yes, he was a treasure seeker who traveled the world alone, eager to unveil the mysteries of life. Now that he was recalling who he was, the man looked around, initially with concern, but then he pieced together that something unusual had happened to him, something that seemed intent on being forgotten. A smile crept onto his face as he thought that he might be onto something significant. Quickly, he gathered his belongings and began asking the locals if anything mysterious had occurred. However, as days turned into weeks, Victor eventually gave up, pondering if he had simply gotten overly drunk and stumbled into this village by accident like the villagers had thought. It seemed unlikely, but the town was utterly normal, bordering on boring, with no leads and nothing keeping him there. The wandering treasure seeker packed his things, opened his map, and marked his next destination. He had heard rumors of a lion that could reveal one's inner desires. Although he was doubtful such a creature existed, he felt compelled to find out. But just as he was about to leave, Victor sensed something strange, a whisper in the air. He turned to look at a nearby hill, which felt empty, as if something were missing. He could hear a faint cry in his mind, a plea from someone whose voice he couldn't remember. It seemed to be calling to him, pleading to him. But Victor, he had wasted enough time. So he shook off this strange sensation and set off, never looking back, never recalling whose voice it was that was crying out to him for help. So, adventurer, what do you think? Why did the tower keep David but let his brother go? Let me know in the comments below. And until next time, in the great eye we trust.